Hi, everybody. A bunch more people, I can see the numbers going up, are going to join us, but we're going to get started pretty much on time tonight. I am Carla Bruni. I'm the Preservation and Resiliency Specialist with the Chicago Bungalow Association. Before I introduce our speakers this evening, just a little bit about how tonight is going to run. Right now, this is playing on Facebook Live. It's also being recorded, you'll notice. So even if you guys come in late or whatever, or you have questions or you can't find a pen or whatever, you can rewatch this as many times as you want later. We will have it available. And also anybody who signed up, if we have your email, we're gonna email you at the end of this with a link to that recording and some other resources as well. So don't worry about anything like that. Throughout tonight, our chat is gonna be, the chat box at the bottom is disabled. Instead, we're going to have everybody if you have any questions, write those questions in the Q&A portion down on the right. Some of those we might answer as time goes on. Angela and I behind the scenes, if they're general questions about the Bungalow Association. Otherwise, we're actually saving all of our questions for the end tonight, just to keep the flow of things going, let our speakers do their thing. I'll also tell you that probably a lot of your questions will be answered. I know everybody wants to jump in because they're eager to hear. We have a lot of people super interested in tonight's topic. But you know, sometimes just hang tight. There's probably most of it will probably be answered. So that said, also, our speakers are probably going to talk for about an hour tonight. And we have a hard stop at 7:30. So we're going to get as many questions as we can afterwards in. We might not get to everything. We'll do the best we can. So again, another great reason to just sort of wait. You might have your question answered anyway, and then we can get to more of them at the end. I think that's all of my little sort of preamble for the evening, but now I just want to introduce our speakers. We have Martha Reynoso. She serves as a Deputy Commissioner for the Chicago Department of Buildings. She's currently overseeing the Easy Permit program. She was born, raised, and educated in Chicago, earned her MBA from North Park University, and worked in the trade show industry as a meetings and education director for 10 years. Prior to joining the Department of Buildings, she worked as a senior business consultant with the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. Today, in addition to helping homeowners and businesses obtain proper permits, Martha also operates as a liaison between both the Department of Buildings and Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. So she ensures that permits and license applications have the information they need applicants have the information they need to start their home project or new business endeavor. So Martha is a good person to know and listen to. Andy Pierce is a Chicago journalist who is also a former city official, a historic preservation advocate, and a trained nonprofit manager. Andy worked for the Chicago Department of Buildings for years, was a chief of staff for the Second Ward Alderman, was a local development for many years as well, and founded the Friends of Uptown, an organization to help save the Uptown Theater, which is actually how I know Andy. He spoke to my grad school class approximately 3 million years ago. His wife, Andy and his wife, Beth Eckerty, own a 1925 historic Chicago bungalow that recently won the 2020 Driehaus Bungalow Award for restoration. Andy does not play when it comes to restoration. So we have really great speakers tonight. This is sort of perfect for our members, and we're really excited to get going. It's the first time we've done this kind of a presentation. And with that, I will give up the floor. I'm gonna just hide behind a picture for this so I don't do anything silly. And then I will hop in at the end and we'll go through questions then, just to remind everybody.
Thank you, Carla. Am I coming through loud and clear?
You are. You sound great.
Thank everyone for coming together on this topic. Having seen so many repeated questions, common concerns about building permits through social media tied to the Bungalow Association, thought it was a good time in the spring to share this topic and get the best information out there we could. On this slide, where we talk about purpose, I found this, and it was really geared toward communities that were considering a better building code or following the international code. Chicago, of course, has a great code. It's easy to use and it's easy to understand. But this saying said, building codes and design regulations mitigate risk. Investors are more concerned with risk than with red tape. Therefore, codes and regulations attract investment. Yes, Carla.
So sorry to bother you, but you said this slide and we're actually not seeing your screen share.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about that.
Martha, did you want to share it or would you like me to share it?
Oh, and Martha, you are muted. Okay, there we go. I'll stay on to make sure we're good.
So, as it says, therefore, codes and regulations attract investment. If you take this to your home, be it a bungalow or another vintage home, you're the investor. You're investing in your vintage home on your block and in your neighborhood. And the improvements you're doing increase your enjoyment of it and the value in the commodity you're holding on to until you sell it or pass it on to your family. You can eliminate some of these known risks by following the building code and utilizing the power of the city's building permit and licensing processes. So many times I hear these sad stories from people who didn't use the permit system or didn't use a licensed general contractor or a licensed electrician or plumber. And it's the, I wish we would have. So this is the point where you can avoid all of those problems that we know come up when you don't do it the right way. There are consequences when you don't follow the law. Your project may be stopped, delayed, or derailed. There can be violations, fines, court costs, and attorney fees. All of that will slow down everything you had planned when you plan to use it and will take more time and money. Unpermitted, incorrect, and unsafe work can harm your family. And it may be something that you do now because you had a guy down the block who really wasn't an electrician do something, but it may come around later to be a problem. You may have home insurance issues. If you do work that wasn't done as under a permit by a licensed tradesperson, then it may not be covered by insurance. It may impact the future value and sale of your home. We'll talk about researching the permit history of your home in a little bit. If you go to sell it and the buyer does his or her research and sees that all of this beautiful work was done without a permit, then they're going to start negotiating down on that price. Finally, neighbors may file a complaint with the city if they see all of this work going on and no permit posted. So you want to avoid that. Think about this. Dependable licensed tradespeople do work under permits. Another way to say that is that successful licensed contractors won't do work without a permit. They will not risk losing their license and livelihood. So if someone is, well, almost as good as a licensed tradesperson, then they're probably doing almost as good work and there will be problems. Licensed contractors are required to be insured and bonded. The City of Chicago holds license holders accountable. Having a permit and a license on your project gives you more recourse if something goes wrong or doesn't pass inspection. If you don't have that license and you don't have that permit, you really have nothing to fall back on except using litigation to try to get someone to do something right. And if there wasn't a permit and there wasn't a license in the first place, then chances are they're not going to finish it correctly. So contractors require you to commit a signed written contract. At the same time, you have the right as owner and customer to have them commit to approved plans and a permit that requires the actual licensed person to do the work on site. Something you want to be cautious of is sometimes unscrupulous people may loan out their license number for others to use. You want the licensed person doing or overseeing that work on the site. I thought of a way to compare this to something outside of our niche of buildings and design and architecture and permits. It's like, well, what would you call an unlicensed merchant marine? Well, an unlicensed merchant marine is a pirate. And essentially, those who are doing work without permits and licenses are pirates. And you don't want pirates working on your house. The city's licensing of tradespeople is an important topic. And tonight we want to help you understand its relationship to permitting.
Okay, thank you, Andy. That was a great analogy. I can't tell you how many times I've heard very sad stories come up because either someone hired an unlicensed contractor or just came into a situation that sometimes going a different route comes out to be 2 to 3 times much more expensive, just because we were trying to cut corners. So with that being said, we're going to move right into what we do have available at our fingertips to make sure we make the right decisions and apply for the right permits when it comes time to that. With that said, a few resources that I want to begin with are just the resources that we have on the City of Chicago Department of Buildings page. First, I want to make sure that you guys can see the City of Chicago website. If you can, yes? Perfect, wonderful.
I see the city online sources directory. Other folks, do you see the website showing up?
Yes.
Very good.
Do you see me pointing to buildings?
No. I
No.
don't see that. I see the 4 boxes where it says City Online Resources, but it's not opening to, when you click on it, to the website.
Okay. All right, that's all right. When you go to the City of Chicago's website, you'll want to hit the option Government. Under Government, you will see Buildings. Under Buildings, you will see these 4 main squares. These 4 main squares are what leads to anything and everything that is on the Buildings page. Under Construction Codes, you will find 4, 5, 6 main construction code books. The ones specific to today's topic are Title 14R, which regulates the repair, alteration, change of occupancy, additions, dormers, or relocation of an existing building. It's work to an existing building, essentially, is what it regulates. Title 14X sets the minimum requirements for that existing building. And Title 14A, which a lot of what we're going to look over today, review, will come from 14A. Especially when it comes to easy permits, what you don't need a permit for will be outlined in 14A. And it looks a lot like this here, if you can see that.
Martha, for those who don't know, the numbers you're citing are all part of the municipal code, and this part of the municipal code is known as the building code, right?
Correct, yes, thank you. Title 14B regulates new construction of buildings and or structures. So with that said, we're talking brand new building from foundation up. For the most part, we'll be looking at existing buildings. Again, Title 14A, which goes into, here's where you will find where the cost of your permit will come from. So you can calculate it yourself. You will see where maybe you want to have a temporary tent in your backyard. Do you need a permit? We'll go through that later. So for our next slide, my number one topic of conversation before we pull permits, before we go down any route, is to know your history. Know the status of your building, know the history of your home. I can't tell you how many times I've come across a new homeowner who comes in and says, I just purchased my home and I found out I have a violation for a fence. Apparently there was something that happened in 2002, which now it's 2021, and we have so much time has passed, violations have been ignored, and they have no idea. It puts you in panic mode. And at the end of the day, let's take a look at what is the history of our building, what permits are at our home, and then just go from there. I tend to use the comparison is when we buy a home, it's like the equivalent of buying a used car. So we buy a used car. I'm sorry to say we inherit all of its problems. The transmission may go out, the head gasket might just go. We have bald tires, and unfortunately, now we got to deal with it. So that's the comparison. Hopefully we didn't blow a head gasket, but we can fix it. It's our problem, we're gonna fix it. So that That's what I mean when know the history of your building, know what you got yourself into.
I would add that it can also be fun. You know, I found the original
Yes.
permit on our home. This is when it was built and approved in 1925. And then for the next owner, they'll probably want to see this permit. This is for an overhead sewer project we did. It's the biggest permitted project on this house. And had we done that without a permit, they would look at the history and find that it hadn't been done properly. So,
Right.
you know, when you're shopping for a house, like you said, shopping for a car, you want to know the history, and it's either there or it's not there. And if it's not there, it also tells a story.
It does. It does. Last week alone, I had a phone call where someone said, I'm looking at buying this building. It's gorgeous. And she says, but I want to make sure it doesn't have any violations. Okay, so we looked it up really quick. It had no violations, but it also had no permits. And she says it's gorgeous on the inside. It makes you question, what did they do? We have no idea if they replaced the piping, the plumbing fixtures. We're starting with zero. We know nothing. So that, again, that being said, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the better informed you are, the better purchase you can make, and you know what you're getting yourself into.
Wouldn't you say that one of the more common problems you see is when people stack permits, little permits along the way, instead of a bigger permit to do
Yes.
a gut rehab or to
Absolutely.
do a conversion? That stacked permit is kind of the red flag to watch out for, or one of
definitely. What that means is they'll pull the plumbing permit, they'll pull a separate electrical permit, they'll pull a porch repair permit, and essentially it means it was a gut rehab. Yeah, definitely. So I'm going to switch back and forth, and I have to apologize from the slide, the 4 squares. If you recall, the 4 squares are where it leads us to the next section. So I do have to apologize. So from trade licensing here, if you were to click on that on the website, it would bring you to this, contractors, trade licensing. Here is where we provide, whether it be a new contractor, an existing contractor, on information on how to renew. We also, I'm not sure if you can see if the font is large enough, you'll also find a list of licensed contractors. We have licensed general contractors, electricians, masons, plumbers, state licensed plumbers, which are very separate from City of Chicago licensed plumbers, and state licensed roofing contractors. On the state side, you have those with that can do unlimited type of jobs, and then you have those that have limited jobs. That is all dependent on the number of units in the building. It's dependent on the insurance as well that they've obtained for themselves. And this is also where on this, if you take a look at the second option there, you'll see drain layer license. So the drain layers may be licensed completely separate from the City of Chicago licensed plumbers. So should you ever pull a permit for underground sewer construction, doesn't necessarily mean they have to be a City of Chicago licensed plumber. If they had a drain layers license, that would be completely fine, completely acceptable, and they can do the work as well. So either or will work. Currently at this time, electricians must take a test before they get their license. They have to pass their test. Same goes for the mason contractors and the plumbers. I have to admit, I don't know what the state requires for licensed roofing contractors or state licensed plumbers.
I was very impressed to see that you have 29,000 licensed professionals working in Chicago. You have to ask yourself, why can't I then find one who's licensed to work on my home? Why do I go with an unlicensed trade person if there are 30,000 or more licensed people out there that you're tracking, have been tested, or insured and bonded? And I think it's a very good point to make.
Yeah, definitely. So moving on now we know where to find our licensed contractors. We've researched our home and know what kind of permits we may or may not have. And we've also been able to research violations. So the next step is, let's find out, When is a permit not required? Again, a lot of the information is going to be coming from Title 14A, 4-402. The code is read-only, and you can definitely access it without having to purchase or download or anything like that. You can purchase it if you wish. You don't necessarily have to be a licensed architect. It's available for everyone. What does not require a permit? At this time, as of the 2019 modernization of the building code, paint, wallpaper, tile, carpet, whether it be in a single family home, a 2-unit, anything under 4 stories does not require a permit. We can replace our kitchen cabinets, our vanities, our countertops, moldings, trim around the door, no MEP, which means no mechanical, no electrical, and no plumbing involved. We can replace drywall. When it comes to replacing drywall or plaster and lath, you can replace up to 1,000 square feet. What does that sound like? In terms of sheets of drywall, I believe it's about 33, just to give you an idea. Again, very likely, if I were to change all of the drywall in this room, I would probably not need a permit, but I might need an electrical permit because at some point I'm probably going to touch an outlet and or a light switch. That's when I, at minimum, might need an electrical permit, because chances are if I'm going to update the drywall, guess what? I probably want to update the electrical. Non-fire rated ceiling tile replacement, non-fire rated interior doors. Again, nothing attached or tied to mechanical, which is ductwork, ventilation, electrical, plumbing, piping. In a home, whether it be single family home or again, or 2-flat, 3-flat, we can replace windows, in-kind replacement of windows, like for like. What does that mean? I'm not changing the size. It's going back where it was. And that's really the idea behind an easy permit. It's always an in-kind replacement. I can't stress that enough. In-kind replacement of interior doors, a hot water heater, a furnace, a boiler, any type of AC equipment. These are all things that would not require a permit.
Martha, when does the energy conservation requirements come into play for, say, windows or roof? Does that play a part in the single family home, or is it only in the bigger buildings?
It's in the bigger buildings. Just because something becomes exempt from needing a permit, it doesn't mean it should not be to code, if that makes sense. When it comes to the energy code, if that's something that you're very concerned about, my recommendation would be to speak with your contractor, get the specifications on those windows, on those doors, to make sure that it does meet current energy code. And again, the code's always evolving, it's changing. We literally just came out about a month ago with the supplement because we look at the code and say, you know what, this doesn't make sense. We need to be a little more flexible, or we need to reel it in and be a little more strict. So, you know, again, for example, a lot of people say the 1,000 square feet of drywall. Well, you'd be surprised how much one room alone will take. And if you're only doing one room at a time over the course of 20 years, then that's okay. In my opinion, that's fine. That's the way my mom worked on her house. It was literally one room at a time. Another exterior pavement, so concrete, non-combustible walking or driving surfaces. Maybe you have a driveway. You might need a permit from the Department of Transportation. Do you need something from buildings? You do not, for the concrete work to replace that driveway. But Department of Transportation will require you to have a driveway permit. And I believe their driveway permit process requires a plat of survey, and the permit itself is about $10. So nothing crazy,
Because
completely reasonable.
They're concerned about where it goes through the curb and where it enters the street and how it affects the street, right?
And how wide it is. Yes, absolutely. Again, non-combustible walking, driving surfaces at or not more than 30 inches above grade, and not over any basement or a story below. What does that mean? That means I can't break up the concrete in my basement because it's not even or level. That would actually require a permit, and we'll go into what kind of permit later. Some repaving projects may obtain a permit to document that they are exempt from a stormwater management ordinance requirement. What does that mean? I'll give you the example of Home Depot. Home Depot has a large parking lot. They have they have stormwater requirements. If they chose to repave their entire lot, they would need a permit.
It's amazing we're still in this section of all the things that don't require a permit.
Oh, there's a lot. There's
yeah.
a lot. You would be surprised. Fences, my favorite, and retaining walls. Fences up to 5 feet above ground on both sides must comply with zoning ordinance. Retaining walls up to 4 feet from the bottom of the footing to top of the wall. So remember, your footing might be a foot deep. So that really means 1 foot footing, 3 inches. I'm sorry, 3 inches, 3 feet of wall, right? For 4 feet from bottom of footing. That's what that means. For fences, this is probably the #1 permit.
For those who may not know what a retaining wall is, that it might be where their yard is taller than the sidewalk and this holds up the yard, or a driveway, or something that holds earth on their property, right?
Correct. Yes. For fences over 5 feet would require a permit under 6. It says must comply with zoning ordinance. The department code as it reads today actually allows an 8-foot fence, but zoning ordinance, the Department of Planning, would not allow that fence in a residential zone to be higher than 6. We have a lot of fences, gates out there, maybe carports that have an overhang where the support for that gate is over 6 feet. This fence requirement or fence permit requirement is probably also the #1 violation we see, where the fence is too tall. The fence is solid. What do I mean by that? My neighbor's fence is a solid wood 6-foot fence. I can't place that same fence at the front of my property near the sidewalk. Per zoning ordinance, that solid fence cannot be higher than 4.5 feet. If higher, the word they use is it has to have a certain opaqueness or transparency. And really what it comes down to is if there were a fire, let's say there's a basement window, and from the front, someone should be able to see inside into, let's say, that basement storage area or basement apartment. You could see smoke. If we had a solid 6-foot fence at the front of the house, we would see nothing, absolutely nothing. It allows someone maybe to hide behind the fence. Per zoning ordinance, it's just at this time, solid fences over that at that height are just not permitted. You can pursue a variation. You can pursue a what they refer to as an administrative adjustment. It will go to City Council. I believe their application fee is starts with a $300 fee, and it may or may not be approved. Landscaping. We do not need a permit to plant a community garden. We might need something from zoning to establish the garden, but we don't need permits to plant vegetation. Shade cloth structures constructed for nursery or agricultural purposes also do not require a permit. Exterior work, re-roofing, such as replacing shingles, does not require a permit. The exception comes to low sloped roofs. So the lower the slope, the more likely you need a permit. So a flat roof would require a permit. In-kind replacement of siding, coating. We went over the AC equipment. This is a new one that wasn't in the code before. In-kind replacement of porches or stairs with the landing of 50 square feet does not need a permit. So let's think about that. If you think about your front porch, what is the landing size? And
Usually
then,
pretty small.
right. And then let's think about our back porch if we have one. Same thing. We can replace it entirely and not need a permit. But the caveat, if you receive a violation, you need a permit. Because essentially the inspectors have to check to make sure that they can sign off on something. There is a height exception. As long as that porch is not higher than 6 feet, we can replace it. 8 feet, we need a permit. Swimming pools with the water depth of 48 inches or less, or not greater than 5,000 gallons, would not need a permit. The installation of playground equipment, accessory to a residential home, would not require a permit. Other exterior repairs, not involving the cutting away or removal of any exterior wall, partition, floor, or roof. Removal or cutting of any beam, column, or load-bearing support. So if it involves this, it needs a permit. So if we're cutting away from an exterior wall or interior wall, removing a partition, removing a floor, cutting the floor, or a roof, permit is required. So let's flip it on its head. Removing or changing a means of egress configuration, you would need a permit. Mechanical, electrical, plumbing, or fuel gas equipment systems. This is also new. Small accessory structures. These are your tool sheds, your storage sheds, your gazebos, your playhouses, water tanks supported on grade. I don't think we would see too many of these in our backyard. The limit here is you can have one accessory structure per property, and this is separate from your garage, that is not larger than 150 square feet and not taller than 12 feet. So I can have a tool shed that size, a storage shed, a gazebo, and I can have one of each. Well, I take it back, not one of each, one of them, and not need a permit. The other one I would include in here is a chicken coop.
Very popular.
Very, yes, absolutely. Especially if it's multi-story, but obviously those stories to the chicken are probably extremely fun. But for the sake of the Department of Buildings, we don't want to permit it. We don't need a permit. Minor electrical work, the replacement of lamps, light bulbs, connection of portable equipment to permanent receptacle outlets, radio and television equipment regulated by the FCC. These are things that would not require a permit. Installation of temporary systems required for the testing or servicing of electrical equipment. Low voltage fixtures for phone or data lines. Low voltage wiring and installation of low voltage wiring in residential buildings up to 4 stories. Portable heating, ventilation, and cooling equipment. Many times these are types of equipment that are just plug and play and it may need some sort of exhaust, but it's nothing that typically requires a permit. Unless of course it's commercial size, then it's definitely different. Any repairs to any heating, ventilation, cooling equipment that does not alter its function would not require a permit. Self-contained refrigeration systems with less than 10 pounds of coolant. The stopping of leaks or repairs of leaks does not require a permit. The clearing of stoppages, removal and installation of water closets. So let's say we have to remove the toilet to fix the seal, that's not something that would require a permit. And then, unfortunately, but fortunately, for Chicago landmark buildings, bungalows, whether they be residential or commercial, you always need a permit. Unfortunately, the list of everything that I mentioned does not apply to you, and you will need a permit to replace your windows, to replace your exterior doors, especially if it's on the front facade of the building. A permit is almost always required as long as it affects the exterior. Some landmarks have been protected, have protected interior features, which must also follow the same rule. I've seen those more on the churches, larger buildings. I have yet to see these features in a single family home. I would be excited to see it, just because.
Martha, sorry, just to interrupt really quick. Just an important point there, that's for Chicago landmarks, and there are no Chicago bungalow districts that are Chicago landmarks. They're only register districts. So don't worry, everybody, if you live in a in a bungalow district, because we have thousands of those. None of those are local landmarks. So none of those are Chicago landmarks. But yes, if it were a Chicago landmark, there are way fewer of those, and there are 0 bungalows that I know of in the city of Chicago that are Chicago landmarks. So I just, sorry to interrupt you. That's just an important.
You're fine. Thank you for mentioning that.
So,
Carla, if I could talk about that one for just a second.
Of course.
I was curious, are there any Chicago bungalow buildings, bungalow homes that are in landmark districts and do fall under an ordinance, like maybe in Beverly or Morgan Park? Or
not that I know of. It's so hard to get a district like that not that I know of.
I couldn't think of one.
Yeah.
But the distinction we're wanting to make here is that we do have some certified Chicago bungalow districts or bungalow historic districts where you see the signs.
Register districts too. Yeah.
Right. West Ridge is one, West Rogers Park.
Tons on the south side, Chatham, West Chatham, Avalon. We've got tons on there. They're on the website as well.
Those
all National Register, so they don't fall under this slide. So all the permit stuff is just what it was before.
Right. Those districts recognize the history, the heritage, the cohesiveness, all the great things about bungalows on that block, different than being a designated Chicago landmark. And I have found that is a misconception carried by many people, including realtors, who don't really understand what a certified Chicago bungalow means. And, all of us who are tuned in here probably know that when you become a certified Chicago bungalow or you join the Bungalow Association, there are certain incentives and programs that are available to you, all of which are positive and helpful. It doesn't come with the protection that is a Chicago landmark. That's something different under the ordinance. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's, so that there's certified Chicago bungalows, there's National Register districts, and then there's Chicago landmarks, which are the creme de la creme. And those are really generally just very extraordinary buildings, or, really not very many districts around the city at all. So whether you're a certified Chicago bungalow, or if you're in a National Register district, which all of our bungalow districts are, then the normal permitting rules apply to you. So nobody should probably have to worry about Chicago landmarks who's on this session tonight. So just wanted to make sure that was.
They may aspire to own one, and I would encourage them to do it. But your certified Chicago bungalow doesn't follow under those set of rules.
Not at all. No. Thankfully, for many people, because that would be a little bit of a push otherwise. So yeah. Sorry about that. Sorry to interrupt, Martha. I just wanted to make sure.
You're completely fine.
At the same time, you can follow the Chicago bungalow guidelines that help you follow the aesthetics of what a bungalow looks like inside and outside. Yeah.
There's no punishment if you don't, or no special punishment, but yeah, we do love bungalows and how they look naturally in the wild. So
thank you.
I'll be quiet now. Thank you guys.
A particular street that I routinely drive down just as I drop off my son at the the Armory at North and Kedzie every once in a while is I love driving down that Logan Boulevard, right and left, gray stones. Oh my goodness, that street is amazing when it comes to
Beautiful.
all of these landmark buildings. It's just something, I don't know, in my opinion, out of this world.
It really is.
But to wrap it up on the Chicago landmarks, for more information, there's definitely more information on the requirements. Many times on the exterior of the building, they want to know the color of the, I believe, the bricks that are being replaced, if they're tuck pointing or replacing broken bricks. Everything has to be replaced as it is. But again, for more information, I would suggest taking a look at the Department of Planning and Development's landmark permit review to get more information on their permits and their requirements. So we've gone over everything that doesn't require a permit. So now we're going to get into when is a permit required. Can you see this? I'm not sure if it's large enough. The yellow page.
You can't really read it. If if you want to get we can currently see like what the next slides are on the right. And I think if you go up to display settings, you might be able to get rid of that. And that would make the actual.
Oh my goodness.
For the most, it was totally fine. You could still read everything, but
Did that help?
I mean, it might be that top one, swap presenter, because you're probably looking at presenter view versus slideshow. So I would click that top one, the swap one. Doing anything?
Hold on. I'm sorry. Can you see the preview of my next slide?
We can, yeah.
You can.
Mm-hmm.
So we probably don't want.
Also important that it's really not been an issue, and you could see we could see everything fine, except this one is very small. So yeah.
All right, I apologize for that. I didn't realize that. Let's try this.
It should. I would think that would work, but seeming to do it.
Is that better?
No, it's still showing presenter view. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Why. It's kind of the only thing I can think. I don't know what those icons at the bottom underneath mean.
I have to apologize to the participants. I thought I had this.
Yeah, I don't know if you can go back to Chris here, who's watching, saying going back to PowerPoint and choose presentation. I'm just not sure what your PowerPoint version is, if it's the kind where you can kind of go back to that. Yeah, it's weird that if you click display settings and you click swap under it, it doesn't do it, but I don't know why it won't do that.
Okay, well, I do apologize for that.
Oh, somebody's saying, okay, it's an icon at the bottom right. Is that, do you see it? There's icons underneath the actual screen to your left, Martha. If you go under where it says when a permit is required, there's some icons. I don't know if you hover, if it says what they do or.
Right here?
I'm guessing, I don't know. I really don't. Okay, Chris is saying no.
All right, and
well, yeah.
I apologize.
Okay. I mean,
usually the swap presenter view works.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't troubleshoot that one.
No worries. We'll keep moving. So you'll hear me talk a lot more is the only difference instead of saying them. If you were on the City of Chicago's website, clicking on permits, that blue permit box that I had showed you previously, you would see a page that's called a section on that page that would say easy permits. Under easy permits, you would see a whole list of when permits are not required. within it, you would find links to other sections of the website that will say when a permit is required, when a permit is required with drawings, what are drawings? These are a design professional would prepare these drawings, whether it be an architect or a structural engineer. They would prepare these drawings and upload into what we call e-plan. From there, a licensed engineer, architect, and or expediter, and now that I think about it, we should probably go into the role of the expediter. The expediter is a licensed person who acts, in my opinion, as the middleman between us, the customer, and the city of Chicago. The expediter may or may not progress the project. What does that mean? Remember, at the end of the day, the expediter is the middleman. Hypothetically, Andy is the architect. I am the expediter. And Carla is our customer. Carla has hired Andy to prepare drawings. I'm the expediter. You are not my only customer. I have to upload drawings for how many people? And then when I receive those corrections from the city, I have to communicate them back to Andy times how many customers. Now remember, I'm the middleman. So with that said, Andy's not going to get to my corrections or to the city's corrections requested until I've notified him. What happens then? Andy sends those corrections back to me. I upload them back into the city's website. So as you can see, there's a lot of back and forth,
Martha, is the key reason that bigger projects, say an entire remodel or gut rehab or addition to a building, is the entire reason people use an expediter really to save the cost of an architect being there per hour versus the cost of an expediter being there? And is it typically the architect or general contractor that guides the customer toward which expediter, be it an individual or a company, that they might choose?
I've seen it different ways. I've seen the expediter be the person to do all of the legwork, to set up the contracts, to get the quotes, to even search for the architect. You have those types of expediters. But I've also seen architects that prefer not to upload anything into the city's system and prefer to work directly with an expediter. So I really can't put, to be honest, I can't put my finger on it.
I ask that because if you go to the suggested resources or recommended resources of the Bungalow Association, I'm going to guess you won't find any expediters listed, and that's probably not where people start a project. But I think if they're working with a licensed general contractor or architect, that they may guide them toward an expediter to save some time and money. But I really take your point that expediters serve many customers at one time, and they may, hate to say this, they may say, well, the city has delays, but the delays might actually be their workload. And I think that's a fair thing to be cautious of.
Right, definitely. One thing, since you actually brought that up, you reminded me, on the city's website, we have I'll call it a clock. It's time to permit. On the bottom of every single permit, it'll say how long it took to issue that permit. As of yesterday, time to permit was 35 days. That's time to permit with architect's plans. That means if your drawings had ventilation, plumbing, electrical, architectural review, structural review, and a zoning review, 35 days is pretty good right now. That's really good.
Right. So if your team is telling you you have more delay than that, it's not the city that's holding up that permit.
Again, we're at the mercy of the designer sometimes. We're at the mercy of the expediter. Normally, for the Department of Buildings, when the project comes into our queue, it immediately gets assigned to a project manager. The project manager then has a project, and they literally throw it on the floor And it's like, all right, plumbing, do your part. All right, electrical, do your part. All right, ventilation, zoning, landmarks, do your part. And
It gets assigned to your different bureaus through your process,
exactly,
through your handling and routing.
exactly. So on that front, that project is being seen by so many eyes all at once. Once all of the corrections have come back, they go back to the project manager and sent back to the architect and/or expediter.
And you're talking about standard plan review, not the easy permit, but the bigger
Correct.
projects like a gut rehab or an addition.
An addition, a dormer, anything that is not a repair and replace permit or an in-kind replacement. So with that said, I'll just really, since it's not as visible for everyone, I'll just run through the list really quick. I will go into a little more detail in some of these. We'll do somewhat of a, is it this or is it that? But just so that you have an idea of what's in the list. And this is also from, if you were to Google or go onto the city's website, this is from a book. It's a small, it's about 15 pages, no more than 15 pages. It's the Guide to Permits. This is just a chart that goes through, as I think you can see, SPR or EPP. The first row is homeowners assistance, which is a separate program that the city has available for those people who need, let's say, smaller projects, modifications to their home. We want to build a deck. We want to maybe finish our basement. Those are the types of programs that go through the homeowners assistance program.
So within that guide is this chart. And if you look on there, it shows all the different types of projects, what kind of plan review it's going to require. And all those columns are the different reviews that may or may not be required.
Exactly.
So you can see entirely the path of what you're in for right there. It's all laid out.
Right. That's the first column. The next one is zoning approval. A lot of projects tend to need zoning approval. When does it need plans? Skylights. Let's say I want to put a skylight in my roof. That would need architect's plans. Sometimes we issue easy permits with architect's plans when it's not a very complicated job. You know, let's say you wanted to install one skylight. We have to be reasonable. I'd like to think the department is reasonable in working with homeowners. That would be something that you could completely do as a single family homeowner under the homeowners assistance program. Whether or not a licensed professional is needed, again, that's either your architect or your structural engineer. Either one can make a recommendation. Let's say you have a structural repair. Let's say you have a large front porch and one of the columns that's holding up part of your roof is maybe it's starting to go bad, whether it's water damage, or maybe we see a slight, it's at a slight angle. That's something that we can very easily take an architect's letter, a structural engineer's drawing, or letter recommendation saying, we recommend, structural engineer Joe Smith, I recommend it be repaired in this fashion. Signed and sealed by him, easy permit application, letter, we're good to go. So that's something that we would allow as an easy permit. Going a little more into easy permits, again, going back to that column, non-structural repairs and in-kind replacement projects, such as a roof tear off and replacement. This is something that would require a permit. Drywall replacements over 1,000 square feet would absolutely require a permit. Fire damage. At what point is it an easy permit, and at what point do we need plans? If anyone's familiar with having had a fire, it's either a small fire or it's a pretty big fire. The path to those is usually, the insurance company typically tends to give guidance on those. They will provide you with what they refer to as a tax and demo form, where you then schedule a inspection with the Department of Buildings. And then if anyone ever needs that phone number or that contact, please feel free to get in touch with myself. Having experienced fire damage very long time ago, I empathize with those situations. Those, at what point is an easy permit? When the inspector goes out and takes a look at the damage, they assign a percentage of depreciation. Anything under 24% can obtain an easy permit. So usually that might be like a small kitchen fire, a porch fire. I'm talking, when it comes to porch fire, I'm talking like 1-story enclosed porch, not a 3-story or anything like that. It's a small, typically small fire.
And how would they request that inspection? Is that after they already have plans to fix it, or is it initially?
No, it's before. It's the initial step before you do anything, because that tax and demo inspection is what's going to say whether or not you need plans or an easy permit. Oh, I mentioned earlier, the structural repairs based on architect or engineer's letter. That's the column example. A certain detached private garages and carports. These are all things that would require a permit. Private garages, we're only allowed 1 garage in our backyard. Minimum size that we would allow on an easy permit is 600 square feet, which is pretty big, but with the zoning review.
Minimum or maximum size is 600?
I'm sorry, maximum.
Maximum.
Maximum, yes.
And that could go through an easy permit?
That can absolutely go through an easy permit, yes. As long as it's kept under 600 square feet and it meets all zoning's rear yard setback requirements. And that carports are becoming really popular. I can't tell you how many I've seen lately. And it's usually, it could usually be an overhang next to your garage, or sometimes it's something separate, kind of gazebo-ish next to the garage. As long as the total square footage between your garage and your carport does not exceed 600 square feet, you can obtain an easy permit. When it goes over, we're going to want to see plans, architect's plans. If that carport is made of some kind of heavy material, metal, we're going to want to see plans.
Understood.
Architect's plans. We're going to want to see footings. We want to see how high it is. For any garage, any carport, currently the code, as of 2019, the highest you can go is 12 feet, which is very different from what it was before. I believe it was 15 feet in the past. So now that we have an idea of what we do need a permit for, I want to go over just the permit application. How do I apply? I'm replacing 1,500 square feet of drywall. I'm replacing a 1-story front, let's say, 60 square foot landing front porch that is maybe about 4 feet from grade. And I want to get an easy permit. It qualifies because it's not a situation where I'm replacing it as it is in kind. So for the easy permit application, if you're not familiar with it, it's the one in the middle. We look for a description of work. What does that mean? A description of proposed work. Replacing drywall is not a sufficient description of work. We want to know how much. Replacing 1,500 square feet of drywall. Replacing drywall in 2 bedrooms and a kitchen. Replacing drywall in my basement, storage room. The cost of construction. The reason why we collect the cost of construction is because the city of Chicago must report back to Cook County assessors, and we all know why.
Right.
I'll leave that there.
Understood.
Which is also the reason why we collect the property index number, because the Cook County assessor's office would like to know. We'll need owner's information, an emergency contact, contractor's information, or owner acting as contractor. What does that mean? Owner acting as contractor. The Department of Buildings will allow you, as the homeowner occupant of the property, to act as your own general contractor or plumber. Whether you're going to, some people are really handy. I personally am not. You can replace your plumbing fixtures. You can replace piping. You can replace the drywall. You can tape it and paint it, and you can do it yourself. But you will, when you apply for the permit, you will have to accept responsibility of the work you're completing, which is the last form, what we refer to as Form 401, applicant acting as contractor. If you were to just look through the form, it's extremely simple. It's really everything in yellow that you see right now is what we would need. If you decided to go the option of, I'm going to hire a licensed plumber, I'm going to hire a licensed general contractor, the only additional information is that contractor's information and their letter of intent or contract. Either or would be sufficient in terms of processing a permit. If you wanted to process a permit tomorrow to put up a 6-foot wrought iron fence, and let's say, and I'm not trying to plug anyone, but just for the sake of giving you an example, Home Depot is going to put it up, or Lowe's or Menards, we'll mention all of them, or Ace Hardware, well, no, they don't do that. One of them, let's say one of them is they would be our licensed general contractor. They're going to give us our specs, 6 foot tall by 140 linear feet in my backyard, enclosing my whole entire property. Letter of intent, permit application, and you email it over to dobeasypermit@cityofchicago.org. Currently with COVID, it's taking us anywhere between 24 and 72 hours to process these. If at any point something is missing, we'll just respond. We need a letter of intent. We need you to sign your application. Whatever we need, we'll get back to you.
So you're telling me most of the easy permits are being turned around within 72 hours?
Majority 24 hours, but yes, at most 72 hours.
That's fantastic. And that goes against what you hear of, it's so hard or it takes so long. And that's often an excuse contractors will use. You're saying the homeowner can go in, do this for the projects that apply and get it turned around pretty quickly.
Absolutely. I don't see why and especially if you're doing the work, there's no reason why we can't turn it around within the same day, in my opinion. As the person overseeing, I go in there myself and pull applications. I can't tell you how many emails we're getting right now, but unfortunately, COVID kind of hit us upside the head because we were not ready for creating processes and on how to process permits. Everything is literally email. So what I miss City Hall being open, to be honest, because what you used to be able to do in a 5-minute conversation is now taking 10 emails. Times how many people?
At the same time, you had to adjust your processes. Did the workload go up because people were doing projects at home?
Violations went up. The workload changed. Last year, it was not busy at all. This year, it started ramping up. So I think we're probably making up for everything that was not done last year. It's been as soon as it hit 40 degrees, permits started picking up. And really that's because the masons were now able to do their work, and the roofing contract, it's warm enough for the roofing contractors to be able to replace, tear off, and work on roofs. Masons usually, I think they need a minimum of 40, 45 degrees for concrete or mortar to set. Okay, so that was the easy permit process. Now we have permits with plans, and we went over these a little bit. As I mentioned earlier, we have standard plan review permits, which are permits that require architect's plans. The city of Chicago has a self-certification program. What is that? Or a self-certified architect program. What does that mean? That means the architect has gone through special Department of Buildings education, specifically to go over the code so that this self-certified architect, when he or she goes into the program, they say, I've gone through the building code. And not every single project is self-certified eligible. A self-certified architect can probably finish a small restaurant, work on a single family home. So what does that do and what does that save? If you remember earlier, I mentioned once the project is uploaded into ePlan, or what ePlan/project docs, which is the program we use, that plan, those plans, those drawings are sent from the project manager to the various plan reviewers, electrical, plumbing, ventilation, and everyone else. The self-certified architect saves that time because the onus is on him or her. They are pretty much saying, I know City of Chicago code. I know plumbing, I know electrical, I know mechanical. The only thing that it may go through, if necessary, possibly a structural review and a zoning review. But outside of that, the self-certified project will be shorter in time than the standard plan review project, just because you're saving the time of that back and forth I mentioned earlier. So just to give you a few examples, I wish we could do a pop quiz, but that would be a little difficult. Is the project a standard plan review project or an easy permit? A dormer addition? We would very likely need architectural plans. We need to see the minimum size of bedrooms. That would be a project that would be either standard plan review submitted by an architect or structural engineer. A porch enclosure, what does that mean? I'm enclosing my porch. Let's say I have a porch, but I want to enclose it, put walls around it, in other words. That would require architect's plans for us to full standard plan review. Garage rooftop deck. I want to finish my unfinished basement, attic to be occupied. I want to, again, standard plan review. I want to change my radiator heat from radiators to having a central HVAC system. Again, that would require a standard plan review. Very likely, there are some projects that will only have that one specific discipline. So something like that would probably only go for a ventilation and refrigeration review, because depending on the drawing, depending on the layout, everything else is probably staying the same except for that. Creating a new doorway and installing a deck, that would require architect's plans. It would go through a structural review, and it would also go through a zoning review. A bathroom or kitchen remodel. What do I mean by that? If I mentioned earlier, it's like, Martha, you mentioned earlier, I don't need a permit for under 1,000 square feet. Well, because during a kitchen remodel or a bathroom remodel, we might be relocating something. We might be moving the kitchen sink from one location to another. We might be moving a gas line. We might be installing a hood. In the bathroom, depending on the age of the home, it may or may not have an exhaust. So depending on what it is, we're not asking for architect's plans, but it is an easy permit. We'll want to see a plumber. Assuming this is not a homeowner acting as their own general contractor or plumber, we would want to see a letter of intent from a general contractor and or from a licensed plumber. Adding an additional bathroom. I say SPR, standard plan review, or easy permit with plans. And the reason why I said this is because if that additional bathroom is in an unfinished basement, an easy permit with plans would be sufficient. But if I'm looking to finish the entire basement and add an additional bathroom, then that's standard plan review. Why? Because the code currently has requirements for light and ventilation, especially when it comes to anything in the basement or in an attic. We want to make sure that you're getting fresh air, that you're getting enough light, that the height, as in most attics or in basements, have the correct height according to the code. Solar panels. Solar panels may or may not be an easy permit with plans or architect's calculations. Solar panels, if it's a ballasted system, would require standard plan review. Solar panels that are not ballasted, and I believe it's 13.4 kilowatts, can be an easy permit with architect's plans and or calculations. A storage shed. So previously we said a storage shed with a floor area of 150 square feet did not need a permit. But let's say my shed is 200 square feet. Well, then I need a permit for it. I need a plat of survey. I need to show on the plat of survey where exactly it's going to be in my rear yard setback, separate from my garage. How far is it from the home? And then essentially that storage shed will go to zoning for a zoning review, and it'll come back to, assuming they're fine with it, it will come back to us, we'll issue the permit. And lastly, solving for violations. And we went through this during our Know Your Home. Solving for violations usually require a permit. And again, that's mainly because when it comes time to go to administrative hearings, they want to see how it's being resolved. The inspector will sign off on that permit verifying, yes, the issue has been resolved. The porch has been repaired, or rebuilt, depending on what the violation calls for. New programs and resources. There are two pretty new and what I would say programs that are a pretty big deal right now going on at the city. The first one is the additional dwelling unit. If you're familiar with the additional dwelling unit, it's essentially being, and I think this actually might be pretty popular among the bungalow homeowners, it's the opportunity to legalize that basement unit or that attic unit, or possibly making sure that that coach house is to code. Those projects are currently being reviewed by the Department of Housing. They would need a pre-approval from the Department of Housing. And then once housing has said it's fine to move forward, it would be a project that would have to be uploaded with architect's plans. Someone would say, but my basement is already done. It's been there 40 years. If you were to obtain a zoning certification, which is something you typically see at the time you purchase a home, you would find that your zoning certification might not recognize that unit that you have in the basement or in the attic. They're going to say, you only have a single family home. There are many units out there that have received violations that have been removed because of the violation. And I'm sure there are many people that would love to bring them back. I know people have mentioned, well, what about the parking? Does that mean that we take away from the existing parking? The way I see the additional dwelling unit ordinance, I feel like it's going to legalize a lot of what's out there. It's going to bring them into compliance. It's going to make sure that, that bedroom size is a minimum of 70 square feet and that height is a minimum of 7 feet. It's going to look at all that. Again, we want to make sure the units are safe and that they are to code. The other big program that the city has is the lead service line replacement program, where from your home to the city line, that line can be replaced. The city is waiving the permit fee for homeowners. I believe, don't quote me on the numbers. I believe there's an income, if it's a family of 4 and the income is around 72,000, I believe the permit fee can be waived. What is the cost of the permit? Currently, I believe it's around 2,100. They will waive up to 3,100. What if I want to increase and make that line larger? Let's say I have a 3/4 and I want to increase it to a 1 or a 1.5. That may cost a little more. It'll require plumber's drawings. Doesn't require a standard review, a standard plan review, but will require plumber's drawings.
Understood.
Andy, did you want to go over the Chicago Bungalow Association resources?
I would just ask that if there's anyone watching this that hasn't looked at the resources online from the Chicago Bungalow Association, please do. So many of those questions we see asked in social media are answered there. And the staff and volunteers and industry professionals have contributed so much to those resources. Please take a look. And also trusted referrals. 4, 5, 6 times a day, someone will ask, hey, who knows a plumber? Who knows an electrician? Who knows a mason? And they have invested the time to vet these people and also take recommendations from bungalow owners and list them there. That is the go-to. Any vintage home you have, go to the trusted referrals of the Chicago Bungalow Association and check those people out first. And if we can move to the questions and answers, I would love to have some help with those, Carla, and maybe we can get those answered before we have to close out at 7:30.
Absolutely. Also, Martha, thank you so much. Andy, thank you so much for all you've already talked about tonight. And also, Andy answered a ton of questions already. Like, it was just like boom, boom, boom that you guys have asked. So if there was one on there that you don't see that you also were curious about, you go into the answered section of Q&A and you'll see those there as well. So yeah, let's just get through as many remaining questions as we can here. There's one I really, did you answer that one about the French drain?
I did not. I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay. Martha, do you know if you need to, just because it's a really common question with bungalow owners, if people want to install a French drain in that gangway between their home, do they need to pull a permit for that?
They do. They can actually easily do it with a plumbing permit.
A plumbing permit?
Mm-hmm. It would be what we refer to, it's an easy permit application. You would need a plumber. Very similar to if you were to install drain tile, the only difference is that it's outside. They would probably just need plumber's drawings and a licensed plumber.
Okay, interesting. We had curiosity, people wanting to know more about the 8-foot fence rule, if they're allowed on side or backyards, but not front yards.
So again, the building department will allow it, but because it's over 6 feet, the zoning department will not. They will not allow it outright without a variation. So essentially what that process looks like is you start the application process, you visit zoning, and zoning will give you what they refer to as a denial letter. With that excuse me. With that denial letter, you then go to zoning, and I believe there's a fee of between $300 and $500. I can't remember exactly how much it is, but you essentially start the process to get the approval to have an 8-foot fence.
Okay. Why is it a problem if permits are pulled per trade instead of one permit for a gut rehab?
For a gut rehab. It's because it's for a gut rehab. So a gut rehab, what does that mean? It means I'm literally gutting the whole entire building. When it's a gut rehab, chances are that home requires architect's plans. We're probably replacing all the electrical lines. We're probably replacing all piping. We're replacing studs, we're reframing. We're probably installing new electrical receptacles and fixtures. And again, we may be relocating bathrooms and kitchens, gas lines. It's again, it's not an easy permit, it would definitely have to be a permit with architect plans.
Got it. And just a reminder to everybody too, this recording is going to go out to everybody who signed up tonight. So don't worry if you're not writing all of this down frantically or something, you'll have access to this afterwards as well. Okay. What is your turnaround time for self-certified permits? And they're asking if 35 days for a standard permit review is typical.
So let's pretend COVID isn't here. If we can, let's say everything went back to normal. And I hope everything will be back to normal at some point in our very near future. At one point, a permit with plans that was not self-certified could take up to 3 months and possibly more. Depending if it was denied by zoning, it could take more. Assuming corrections are going back and forth in a decently decent time frame, that permit would probably be issued in about 3 months. A self-certified project will probably be issued in a month and a half.
Month and a half.
But those self-certified projects and architects probably increase their price tag.
Okay, if it's self-certified, then it's more. Okay. After purchasing, you find out that the seller did not acquire necessary permits for the work done. What can be done, and are you held liable? I know you spoke to this somewhat, but people joined at different times, so I think it's good to go over.
It happens a lot. The example of the woman who bought a gorgeous home, and she said there's absolutely no permit history, no violation history. If it's something you wish to do, you can hire an architect and pull a permit for what they refer to as built. In other words, we're pretty much taking everything as we find it. Unfortunately, for when it comes time to inspect that job, we may have to open up a section in the drywall to see what's behind, to make sure that you have insulation. We may have to remove a toilet or sink to make sure that it's copper and not galvanized, or that in fact everything is to code. So it's going to be a little it'll be a little bit of work on the inspection side, but probably very much well worth it to have that building permit, and more importantly, having those plans on hand.
Okay. Does a ground level deck require a permit, and can it go to the lot line if the house is at the lot line and the neighboring house is 12 feet away from the lot line?
These are good questions.
Yeah.
If the neighboring house is 12 feet away. So no, at minimum, typically you have to be 3 feet away from the lot line, especially if a frame construction. How large can the deck be? It depends. It depends on the size of your backyard. It depends on your, again, your rear yard setbacks. The Department of Planning and Development wants us to have a yard. They're not in favor of a full concrete yard or a fully enclosed yard where it's backyard, where it's house, deck, garage. They want you to enjoy that backyard space. So we have the zoning department wants us to respect those rear yard setbacks. If your architect were to build out that deck, they will make it X large depending on what you're looking for, and zoning will come back and say, I'm sorry, you're going to have to bring it back X amount as to fulfill that rear yard setback.
Carla, can we get to the question about lead service lines? And then there's been several questions about costs of permits.
Yes, absolutely. Go for it, Andy.
I don't know the answer to this one, but Anonymous is asking, is city planning or any other programs for lead service line replacements, even with the permit being waived, the cost to replace lead lines for water could be $25,000 or more? city seems to be requiring replacing the line if they touch the plumbing in a project in any way.
Right. He's absolutely correct. I would make the recommendation of visiting. I'm going to go back on the slide. I believe we included the webpage for specific information on the lead service line replacement program. I would visit leadsafechicago.com. They are taking applications now. It's something that you would work closely with your plumber to apply for. To my knowledge, this is what you would be working directly with the tap water permits, which is essentially the Department of Water Management.
So that's being spearheaded by water management.
Correct.
And are they correct in saying that if they're doing a project where they're going to be impacting the service line, that it will need to be replaced?
It's being required currently, correct.
Okay, thank you.
And the standalone permits, not as a part of new construction. I believe those jobs on their own can be between $15,000 and $18,000.
And then there's some general questions about costs of permit, like for the fence project, for EPP, for standard plan review. Are there some ways to talk in general about what does the permit itself cost?
Sure. A fence permit, I can tell you, should be about $150. If zoning were to approve your fence to be over 6 feet, that fence would be about $350. Anything over 6 feet would be $350. If an easy permit, hypothetically, and I will make my hypotheticals will be very simple in terms of, let's say I'm talking about single family home. I'm replacing drywall and I might need an electrical permit. Again, and something I forgot to mention is electrical permits are absolutely 100% available online via your electrician. He can process them, he can print them, he can pay for them online. So lots of times they send the homeowner in, and for us to interpret, to be the middleman is really difficult when it comes to electrical work, which is the reason why it's 100% online. But hypothetically, let's say we're replacing drywall separate from our electrical permit. To replace drywall alone in a single family home, you're talking about $175. The electrical permit will range between $75 and possibly $150. Plumbing permit, basic plumbing. We're talking replacing piping, drainage, drainage and fixtures, about $225.
Very good info.
One thing I just wanted to address, because we get this question a lot, is, how can I obtain the blueprints for my house? It's real hard.
It is. It really is.
Hire an architect usually, unless you get lucky and find something in the basement after you move in. So unfortunately, yeah, you have to have somebody come out and actually measure your house and recreate those for you most of the time.
A really popular question that I get a lot is plat of surveys. The city does not hold plat of surveys. We would only have it is on file if and when a full building permit for whether it's an addition or a major remodel took place in the home, just because we would have collected it at that time. So if hypothetically, that a dormer addition was completed at the home 30, 40 years ago, there's a very good chance we're going to have that plat of survey and those plans on file. For that, you would just have to submit what we refer to as a FOIA request, the Freedom of Information Act. To file for a FOIA request, because we know now how to search our home history, we're going to go and plug in our address, look at our home history, look at the permits, and anything that you see that has the prefix of either reno or building, chances are it has plans tied to it. So when you email the FOIA department, and that's at dob/FOIA@cityofchicago.org. When you email them, you'll want to send your water bill and/or deed, and specifically specify that you're looking for the drawings on permit number 100, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
And also we actually have to wrap up. We got through a Herculean number of questions tonight, actually. I'm really impressed. There was so much information through this presentation, and then also so many questions answered. If you have additional questions, and I know some of you do, you want to email dob-info@cityofchicago.org. That's correct, Martha, right?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
dob-info@cityofchicago.org. And they're pretty responsive as well, from what I understand.
Yes.
There's just an endless number of questions and variations on questions. So, but we got through truly a ton tonight. Yeah, I cannot thank Martha and Andy enough. You guys were so helpful. This was the first time doing this kind of a presentation, and I think it was really, really helpful for a lot of people. So thank you so much once again for all the thought you put into this in time. And yeah, I guess with that, we will sign off for the evening. I always feel so unceremonious because we can't be like, thank you, but
Martha,
like so
Martha,
different from library days,
Martha, thank you for all that you do and the care you put into helping customers.
Thank you.
I know through the pandemic, it's been tough and everybody wants to work on these projects. So like you said, the rate of applications is increasing. Get your permit application in now so you can do that project this spring and summer.
Yes, excellent point to end on there as
Definitely.
well. All right, well, good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Have a good night.
Our pleasure.